The bridge of the Vathek warship hummed with the sound of victory as Commander Shivara watched the human colony station break apart in the darkness of space. The structure had lasted less than an hour under their assault, and now twisted metal and frozen atmosphere leaked into the void like blood from a wounded animal. Shivara's scales gleamed purple and black under the red lighting of the war bridge, and her tail swished with satisfaction behind her command throne. The Vathek had conquered 47 species across 12 sectors of the galaxy, and these humans would be no different from the rest. Commander, our second officer hissed through sharp teeth. The station is breached, and life support is failing in all but one section. Shivara leaned forward with interest, sparking in her golden eyes. Survivors? Thermal scans show one human signature in the engineering bay. The officer replied while studying his console. He appears to be alone. Most species would have fled or hidden when faced with Vathek warriors, but Shivara had learned that studying survivors could provide useful intelligence for the conquest. Ahead, prepare a boarding party, she commanded as she rose from her throne. I will lead it myself. The docking tube connected with a hiss, and Shivara led 6 of her finest warriors into the dying station emergency. Lighting cast everything in shades of red and amber, and the air tasted of smoke and fear. They moved through corridors lined with bodies until they reached the engineering section, where one door remained sealed and pressurized. Shivara's tactical officer burned through the lock, and the door slid open to reveal a human male sitting calmly at a console. He was unremarkable by human standards from what Shivara had studied in the intelligence reports, middle-aged with gray threading through his dark hair and wearing the simple coveralls of a station engineer. What struck her immediately was his lack of reaction to 7 armed Vathek warriors entering his sanctuary. Most beings screamed or begged, or at least showed the decency to tremble. This human simply glanced at them, then returned his attention to the console, where his fingers moved across the interface with steady precision. You are the last survivor, Shivara announced in the human language that her translator rendered perfectly. Your station is destroyed and your people are dead. I know, the human said without looking up from his work. His voice was calm and measured, like someone discussing the weather rather than genocide. Shivara felt the first stirring of genuine curiosity. She had broken warrior kings and seen planetary leaders weep for mercy, but this simple engineer showed no fear whatsoever. What is your name? Marcus Webb, he replied while still focused on his console. Chief engineer for this station. What are you doing, Marcus Webb? Trying to restore power to the emergency beacon, he said matter-of-factly. Though I suppose that does not matter much now. Shivara approached him slowly while her hand rested on the plasma weapon at her hip. She studied his face for signs of shock or the emotional shutdown that sometimes preceded hysteria in prey species. Instead, she saw only concentration and perhaps a hint of irritation that his work was being interrupted. You should be afraid, she said quietly. Marcus finally looked up at her and met her eyes without flinching. Human eyes were strange things compared to Vathek vision organs, but his gaze held steady and clear. Should I? He asked with what might have been genuine curiosity. Would it change anything? The question caught Shivara off guard. She had expected pleading or defiance, or even attempted bargaining, but not philosophical inquiry. No, she admitted, it would not. Then fear seems like a waste of energy, Marcus said, and returned to his console. One of Shivara's warriors growled low in his throat and raised his weapon, but she held up a hand to stop him. You interest me, human, she said. I will take you alive for study. That is your choice, Marcus replied without inflection. 2 warriors moved forward to restrain him, but Marcus stood on his own and held out his wrists for binding. He moved with neither resistance nor cooperation, and simply accepted the situation as one might accept rain on a cloudy day as they marched him back through the ruined station. Shivara watched him carefully. He looked at the bodies of his fellow humans with something in his expression. But not the raw grief she expected. It was something darker and colder, like anger, frozen so solid it became ice aboard the Crimson Talon. Marcus was processed and placed in a containment cell in the detention level. The cell was a cylinder of transparent alloy that allowed full observation from all angles, with only a sleep platform and basic facilities inside. HFY visited him there an hour after his capture and found him sitting calmly on the platform with his hands folded in his lap. Most prisoners pace or rage when first confined. She observed Marcus, looked at her through the transparent barrier. Most prisoners probably have not studied human history, he said. What does your history teach about imprisonment? That you should conserve your energy and observe your captors. Marcus replied evenly. Panic is for prey animals. HFY felt her scales ripple with an unfamiliar sensation. Was this human actually calm, or was he simply broken in some way that did not show on the surface? You are alone against an entire fleet, she said while moving closer to the cell. Your species is scattered and weak compared to the Vothic Empire, and your world will fall within months. Probably, Marcus agreed. This does not frighten you? Marcus was quiet for a long moment, and his eyes never left hers. Commander, he finally said, may I ask you a question? HFY gestured for him to continue. When you hunt an animal on your homeworld, Marcus said slowly, does it run? Of course, HFY replied. All prey runs. And does running save them? HFY understood his point, but something about the way he phrased it made her tail twitch with unease. No, she admitted. We are faster. Marcus nodded as if she had confirmed something important. Running only makes sense if you think you can escape, he said quietly. The words were simple, but the way he said them sent a chill through HFY's blood. There was no resignation in his tone and no acceptance of defeat. Instead, there was a certainty that made her wonder what this human knew that she did not. You cannot escape, she said firmly. No, Marcus agreed. I cannot. He settled back against the wall of his cell and closed his eyes as if preparing to sleep. HFY stood there for several minutes longer while trying to understand why a conversation with a defeated prisoner had left her feeling like she had missed something crucial. Finally, she turned and left the detention level. But Marcus Webb's calm face and steady voice followed her into her dreams that night. The human had not run, and somehow that was more disturbing than if he had. 3 weeks passed since Marcus Webb became a permanent resident of the Crimson Talon's detention level and commander. HFY found herself visiting his cell more frequently than she cared to admit. The Vothic fleet had pushed deeper into human territory and destroyed 6 more colonies with minimal resistance. Humans fought bravely, but their ships were outdated and their tactics predictable. Victory seemed inevitable, and yet HFY could not stop thinking about the engineer who refused to show fear. Tell me about your species, she said during one of her visits while standing before his transparent cell. Marcus sat cross-legged on his platform and looked up from the book display she had provided him as a gesture of what the humans called mercy. What would you like to know? Why do humans persist in fighting when they clearly cannot win? HFY asked. Every other species has offered surrender by now. Marcus considered this while closing his book display. Do you know how humans evolved, Commander? You are mammalian omnivores from a medium-gravity world, HFY recited from the intelligence briefings. Nothing remarkable. True, Marcus agreed. But do you know how our ancestors hunted? HFY's tail curled with interest. The hunting practices of a species often revealed much about their nature in warfare. Tell me, humans are persistent hunters. Marcus explained in that calm teaching voice he often used. We cannot run as fast as most prey animals, and we have no natural weapons like claws or venom. Then how did you survive? We walked, Marcus said simply. We would find an animal and follow it at a steady pace while the animal would run away in a burst of speed. and we would track it and keep walking. Shivara frowned while trying to understand the strategy. The animal would rest, and we would keep coming. Marcus continued. It would run again and tire itself out while we just kept walking at the same steady pace for hours or even days, until the animal was too exhausted to run anymore. That seems inefficient. Marcus smiled without humor. It seems inefficient until you realize that it works. He said, humans can walk farther than almost any other land animal on Earth, and we can sweat to cool ourselves while running prey literally runs itself to death trying to escape us. Shivara felt something cold settle in her stomach at the image. You are saying humans are built to never stop chasing. Exactly. Marcus said while meeting her eyes. We are not the fastest or the strongest, but we are the most persistent, and we will follow our prey to the ends of the earth. The conversation stayed with Shivara longer than she expected. She began researching human history more thoroughly, and what she found both fascinated and disturbed. Her humans had a concept called spite, which allowed them to harm themselves if it meant harming their enemies worse. They had fought wars lasting decades over principles. Rather than resources, they had something called pattern recognition that let them see connections and predict outcomes with disturbing accuracy. Shivara found herself consulting Marcus on tactical matters and telling herself it was simply to better understand human defenses. The colony of Proxima will likely have its defensive platforms positioned here and here, she said during one session while displaying a holographic map. Marcus studied it for a long moment. Probably, he agreed. Humans tend to protect population centers first. How would you defend it? Marcus glanced at her with an unreadable expression. Are you asking me to help you kill my own people? Commander? I am asking for your professional opinion as an engineer. Marcus was quiet, then nodded slowly. The platforms are outdated, he said. They will focus on the frontal assault and leave the flanks vulnerable to fast attack ships. His assessment proved accurate. The Proxima colony fell within hours, and Shivara's tactical report to the fleet command was praised for its precision. She rewarded Marcus with better food and more freedom within his cell. Strange things began happening in the third week. A supply ship disappeared between jump points with no distress signal navigation. Errors became more frequent across the fleet and required constant correction. System failures plagued the Crimson Talon, and nothing catastrophic but annoying life. Support would fluctuate, and weapons targeting needed recalibration, and the communication array developed intermittent static. Engineering teams blamed it on wear from extended deployment, but Shivara noticed that Marcus always seemed to be reading or resting peacefully whenever these failures occurred. One night cycle, she came to his cell and found him awake and staring at the ceiling. You are not sleeping. Neither are you. Marcus observed. Shivara approached the cell barrier slowly. What are you doing, human? Marcus turned his head to look at her. Right now? Thinking, what are you doing to my ship? Shivara hissed with her control slipping. For the first time since his capture, Marcus smiled. It was not a friendly expression. Me? He said with false innocence. Commander, I am a prisoner in a sealed cell, and how could I possibly affect your ship? Answer me. Marcus sat up, and the smile faded into something harder. You asked me about human nature, he said quietly. We are persistent, and we recognize patterns. And we are very, very good at breaking things. You gave me intelligence about human defenses, Shivara said while her mind raced. You helped us. Did I? Marcus asked. Or did I tell you exactly what you wanted to hear mixed with just enough truth to make it believable? Shivara felt her blood run cold. Every system failure, she whispered. Every navigation error. I wonder, Marcus said while leaning back against his cell wall. What happens when an engineer gives technical advice to people who do not understand the underlying systems, and what happens when small errors accumulate over weeks, and what happens when someone has been watching and learning how your technology works this entire time? You have no access to our systems. Marcus just looked at her with those steady human eyes. Do you know what else humans are good at, Commander? He asked. We are excellent at making friends, and your junior engineers are very proud of their work and love to explain it to someone who shows genuine interest. Shivara's mind reeled the conversations between guards and prisoner that she had dismissed as harmless were intelligence gathering. The questions Marcus asked about Vathic culture and technology were not curiosity, but reconnaissance. You have been sabotaging us from inside your cell. Have I? Marcus asked. Or are your ships just old and your crews tired and your logistics stretched thin from rapid expansion? The doubt was worse than certainty. Shiver could not prove anything, but she knew in her bones that this human had been working against them. Since the moment of his capture, why did you not flee? She demanded. At the station, when you could have taken an escape pod or hidden in the debris field, where we might not have found you. Marcus stood and walked to the transparent barrier so they were face to face with only the clear alloy between them, because one refugee would warn a few colonies. He said softly, but a prisoner inside your flagship? I could learn so much more. Shivara stared at him while her worldview shifted. Marcus Webb had not been captured at all. He had positioned himself exactly where he wanted to be. You stayed on purpose. I stayed because it was the most effective option. Marcus corrected. Fear and survival instinct tell you to run, but strategy and sacrifice tell you to stay and fight from the inside. Shivara left the detention level with her thoughts in chaos. She ordered a full diagnostic of all ship systems and increased security around the prisoner, but the damage was already done, and she could feel it. Marcus Webb had been inside their command structure for 3 weeks, and learning and adapting and quietly dismantling their advantage piece by piece, and, worst of all, she suspected he was not done yet. The Vathic fleet emerged from hyperspace around the human world, designated as Sanctuary and Commander. Shivara expected another easy victory. Intelligence reports indicated moderate defenses and a population of 12 million spread across 3 continents. The planet should fall within days according to every tactical model the fleet command possessed. Instead, the Vathic ships found themselves facing a defensive formation that seemed to know exactly where they would appear. Human warships were positioned perfectly to exploit the temporary vulnerability that occurred during hyperspace emergence. Plasma fire raked across the crimson Talon shields before Shivara could even issue orders. Evasive maneuvers, she shouted while gripping a command throne as the ship lurched. Her tactical officer's display showed human ships moving with precision that spoke of weeks of preparation. They knew we were coming. Her second officer hissed. They knew exactly when and where. The battle that followed was unlike anything Shivara had experienced in 20 years of conquest. Human ships employed tactics that perfectly countered Vathic strategies and exploited weaknesses that should have been secret. When the Vathic tried their standard pincer movement, the humans were already repositioning to create crossfire zones. When the fleet attempted to overwhelm the orbital platforms with concentrated fire, the platforms activated shielding configurations that deflected the specific frequency of Vathic plasma weapons. It was as if the humans had studied the Vathic playbook and prepared counters for every page. Fall back to defensive formation. Shivara ordered as another ship in her squadron took critical damage. The fleet began to retreat in disorder, and something that had not happened in 3 generations of Vathic expansion as the Crimson Talon limped away from Sanctuary with hull breaches. On 3 decks, Shivara's mind raced through the implications. Someone had given the humans detailed intelligence about Vathic tactics and technology. Someone had warned them about the attack and given them time to prepare. Someone had been feeding information out from inside the Vathic fleet itself. Shivara stormed through the corridors to the detention level with 4 guards. Following behind her, she did not bother with protocol. and simply ordered the cell barrier drop. Marcus Webb sat calmly on his platform and looked up as she entered with her weapon drawn. "You," she snarled. "You did this." "Did what?" Marcus asked with that infuriating calm. "You warned them." Shivara's tail lashed behind her. "You gave them our tactical plans and our weapons frequencies and our arrival vectors." Marcus stood slowly with his hands visible and empty. "Commander, I have been in this cell under constant surveillance," he said. "How could I possibly communicate with anyone? Do not play games with me, human." Shivara advanced until the barrel of her plasma weapon nearly touched his chest. "We just lost 7 ships and 200 warriors because Sanctuary knew exactly how we would attack. Did they?" Marcus asked while tilting his head. "Or did they simply prepare for the most logical assault pattern based on standard military doctrine?" Shivara wanted to pull the trigger, but something made her hesitate. Marcus was too calm and too collected, like someone who had planned for this exact moment. "The system failures," she said slowly as pieces fell into place. "The navigation errors and the communication glitches." "Yes?" Marcus prompted. "You were not sabotaging our systems," Shivara whispered as horror dawned. "You were using them." Marcus's expression shifted slightly, and not quite a smile, but close. "Do you know what else humans are good at, Commander?" he asked. "We are excellent at repurposing technology, and your communication array has been broadcasting on frequencies you were not monitoring." Shivara felt her blood turn to ice. "How long?" "Since the 2nd week," Marcus admitted. "Your engineers were very helpful in explaining how to recalibrate the system, and they thought they were just teaching me about Vothic superiority in communications design. You have been sending intelligence to human forces this entire time. Every tactical consultation you requested," Marcus confirmed. "Every question you asked about human defenses and every plan you shared to get my opinion, and all of it transmitted in compressed data bursts, hidden in what looked like random static." Shivara's weapon trembled in her grip. "You could have fled," she said again while struggling to understand. "At the station when we first boarded, and you could have escaped." "We have been over this," Marcus said patiently. "No," Shivara shouted. "One refugee could have warned nearby colonies, but this is something else entirely." Marcus met her eyes, and for the first time she saw the predator that had been hiding behind the calm engineer facade. "You were right," he said quietly. "One refugee would have saved maybe a dozen colonies if they were very fast and very lucky." He took a step closer, and Shivara found herself stepping back despite having the weapon. "But a prisoner inside your flagship?" Marcus continued. "A cooperative source who could feed you information while learning all your secrets? Someone who could monitor your communications and study your technology and warn not just nearby colonies, but coordinate the entire human defensive network? You stayed to become a spy. I stayed to become the most valuable intelligence asset humanity had," Marcus corrected. "Every question you asked me was an opportunity, and every consultation was a chance to learn, and every day I spent in this cell was another day of information flowing to human command." Shivara's mind reeled at the implications. The tactical reports she had filed based on Marcus's advice were compromised. The intelligence assessments were poisoned with subtle misinformation. The minor system modifications that engineering had made based on his suggestions had introduced vulnerabilities. "Throughout the fleet, how much damage have you done?" "Enough," Marcus said simply. Alarms blared throughout the ship, and Shivara's communicator crackled to life. "Commander, we have multiple human ships emerging from hyperspace," her tactical officer reported. "It is an attack fleet, and they are heading straight for us." Shivara looked at Marcus, who smiled without warmth. "Earth's defensive fleet," he explained. "I told them exactly where you would retreat to, and exactly what condition your ships would be in. You led them here. I gave them an opportunity, Marcus said. The rest they plan themselves, and humans are very good at planning. When they know what they are facing, the ship shuddered as weapons fire impacted the shields. Shivara should have left to command her forces, but she stood frozen while staring at the human, who had outplayed her so completely. You use me, she whispered. Yes, Marcus admitted without shame. You wanted a prisoner to study, and I needed a platform to work from, and we both got what we wanted. I should kill you now, Marcus nodded slowly. You could, he agreed, but it would not change. Anything in the information is already out there, and the damage is already done and killing me. Now would just be spite. Shivara's weapon lowered slightly. You said humans are capable of spite. We are, Marcus confirmed, but spite is most effective when it serves a larger purpose, and my death serves no purpose except making you feel better. Another explosion rocked the ship. The cell was never secure, Shivara said, while understanding dawned. From the very beginning, Marcus agreed. I am an engineer. Commander and I has been working with communication systems and security protocols and jury-rigged solutions my entire career. He gestured at the transparent walls around them. Did you really think a simple civilian could not find ways around? Military security designed by engineers who are probably very good at their jobs, but have never had to think like someone trying to break out. He asked Shivara. Felt something break inside her. The humans were not the scattered and weak prey she believed them to be. They were patient and clever and willing to sacrifice their own to achieve victory. And Marcus Webb had proven that a single human with time, an opportunity, could bring down an entire fleet. I underestimated you, she said quietly. Marcus's expression softened slightly. You underestimated all of us, he replied, and that was your first mistake. The ship shuddered again, and this time the lights flickered. Shivara's communicator erupted with damage reports and calls for orders. She looked at Marcus one last time while trying to memorize his face. This human who had beaten her not with superior weapons or numbers, but with patience and intelligence and the willingness to sacrifice his freedom for the greater good. This is not over, she said. Marcus smiled sadly. Yes, Commander, he replied. It is. The Crimson Talon shuddered under sustained fire as Earth's defensive fleet pressed there. Advantage Commander Shivara ran through the corridors toward the bridge while emergency lighting cast everything in shades of red and amber. Behind her, the detention level was in chaos as human boarding teams cut through the outer hull. This was not a rescue mission according to the intercepted communications. This was a precision strike to seize control of the Vathek flagship and use it as a trap. For the rest of the fleet, Marcus Webb had not just provided intelligence to his people, and he had given them a complete tactical breakdown of how to capture a Vathek warship. From the inside, Shivara reached the bridge to find her crew fighting a losing battle against ships that knew every weak point in their defenses. Status, she demanded. Shields at 30% and falling. Her tactical officer reported. Human ships are targeting our engine core and hyperspace generator. They want us alive. Shivara realized of course they did, because Marcus had spent weeks studying every system aboard the Crimson Talon they captured. Flagship would give humanity access to Vathek military technology and command codes and fleet coordination protocols. Prepare to scuttle the ship. She ordered. Her second officer turned to stare at her. Commander, we can still fight our way clear. No, Shivara said while watching human ships maneuver with perfect coordination on the tactical display. We cannot, and they will take this ship and use it against the fleet unless we deny them that prize. Explosions echoed through the hull as boarding teams breached the detention level. As made her decision in an instant. Evacuate all essential personnel to the escape pods, she commanded. I will set the scuttling charges myself. What about the prisoner? Shivara's tail lashed with anger and frustration, and something that might have been respect. "Leave him," she said. "The humans are here for him anyway." She led a squad of her best warriors down to the detention level to buy time for the evacuation. The corridors were full of smoke and the sound of plasma. Fire echoed from multiple directions. Human soldiers moved through the ship with the confidence of people, following a map, and of course they were because Marcus had given them complete schematic. Shivar's group reached the detention block to find it already occupied by a dozen human soldiers in combat armor. They had established a defensive perimeter around Marcus's cell, and their weapons tracked the Vathek warriors with deadly precision. "Stand down," a human voice called through a translator. "We do not wish to kill you, but we will if necessary." Shivara raised her weapon, but Marcus's voice cut through the tension. "Commander, do not." She could see him through the cell barrier, still calm despite the battle raging around him. "They are here for you." She called out. "I know," Marcus replied, "and you cannot stop them. I can kill you before they reach you." "You could," Marcus agreed, "but you will not." Shivara felt her grip tighten on her weapon while her warriors looked to her for orders. The human soldiers waited with professional discipline. "Why do you think I will spare you?" She demanded. Marcus stepped closer to the cell barrier. "Because you want answers," he said simply, "and because killing me now accomplishes nothing except denying yourself understanding." He was right, and Shivara hated that he was right. She gestured for her warriors to lower their weapons. "I am rigging this ship to self-destruct," she told the human soldiers. "You have 10 minutes to evacuate." "Understood." The human commander acknowledged. "We only came for our engineer." The cell barrier dropped, and Marcus walked out calmly, as if leaving work at the end of a normal shift. Shivara could have shot him then, but instead she found herself following as the human soldiers escorted Marcus toward their extraction point. "Why?" she asked while keeping pace beside him. Marcus glanced at her. "Why what?" "All of this." Shivara gestured at the chaos around them. "The sacrifice and the manipulation, and the staying when you could have fled." Marcus was quiet as they navigated through smoke-filled corridors. "Do you have children, Commander?" He finally asked. The question caught her off guard. "I have 3 offspring," she admitted. "Then you understand," Marcus said. "Everything I did was not about saving myself." They reached a breached airlock where a human assault shuttle waited. The human soldiers formed a protective cordon while their commander gestured for Marcus to board. He paused at the threshold and turned back to face Shivara one last time. "I stayed because fleeing would have saved one person," Marcus said quietly. "But staying meant I could save everyone else." "You call this salvation?" Shivara gestured at the dying ship. "My fleet is in disarray, and my people are retreating, and you have disrupted an entire military campaign." "Yes," Marcus said simply. "I call it salvation because my children will not have to fight you, and neither will their children, and that is worth any price." Shivara felt something twist in her chest. "We are warriors," she said. "We fight to conquer, and to expand our empire, and to bring glory to our people." Marcus nodded slowly. "I know," he replied, "and that is the difference between your kind and mine." "What difference?" "You fight to conquer," Marcus explained. "We fight to ensure our children never have to fight at all." He stepped onto the shuttle but continued speaking. "You see sacrifice as weakness," he said. "We see it as the only thing worth doing, and I did not flee because fleeing is what prey does." The shuttle engines began to warm up. "You made a fatal mistake when you assumed humans were prey," Marcus said while meeting her eyes one last time. "We are not the hunted, Commander, and we never were." Shivara felt ice form in her veins. "Then what are you?" Marcus smiled without warmth. "We are persistence hunters," he said. "We are the species that walks our prey to death across continents and years in the stars if necessary." He paused and let his words sink in. "You thought you were conquering us," Marcus continued. But from the moment you attacked that first colony, you became the prey, and now you are going to run." "We do not run," Shivara hissed. "You will," Marcus predicted with absolute certainty. "You will flee to whatever remains of your empire, and you will spend every day wondering when we will catch up." The shuttle door began to close, because that is what we do. "Commander," Marcus called over the sound of engines, "we chase, and we follow, and we never stop, and eventually we always catch our prey." The shuttle detached and accelerated away through the breached hull. Shivara stood in the airlock while watching it disappear among the human ships. Her communicator crackled with reports of evacuation progress. She had 5 minutes to reach an escape pod before the scuttling charges detonated, but she stood frozen while Marcus Webb's words echoed in her mind. Humans were not prey, and they had never been prey. They were something far more terrifying, and they were patient predators who were willing to walk into the mouth of danger if it meant protecting their young. Shivara finally turned and ran for the escape pods. For the first time in her life, she understood what it meant to flee from something that would never stop chasing. The crimson talon exploded behind her as her pod launched into space. Around her, the Vathic fleet was in full retreat while human ships pursued with methodical efficiency. Not the wild fury of victory, but the steady, patient pursuit of hunters who knew their prey was already tired. Marcus had not just defeated them, he had taught humanity exactly how to hunt the Vathic, and now the chase had begun. Shivara's pod was picked up by a surviving Vathic destroyer. She immediately ordered a course set for the nearest Vathic stronghold. As the ship jumped to hyperspace, she looked back at the battle and saw human ships already moving to pursue. They would not catch this ship today or tomorrow, but they would keep coming, and that thought was more terrifying than any weapon, because Shivara finally understood what Marcus had been trying to tell her all along. The humans would never stop. They would chase the Vathic across the galaxy if necessary and walk them to exhaustion, just like their ancestors had done to prey animals on their homeworld. The hunt had only just begun, and the Vathic were learning too late that they were not the hunters in this story. They were the prey who had made the mistake of attacking a predator's young. And now they would run, and the humans would follow forever if they had to, because that is what persistence hunters do. 6 months after the battle at Sanctuary, the Vathic Empire was collapsing. Commander Shivara stood in what remained of the military command center on Vathic Prime and watched holographic displays show the steady retreat of her people's forces. Every week brought news of another occupied world falling to human liberation forces, not through overwhelming power, but through the same patient, methodical approach that Marcus Webb had demonstrated. Humans had learned from captured Vathic technology and adapted it. They had decrypted communication protocols and turned the Vathic coordination network against itself. They had done to an entire empire what one engineer had done to a single ship, and they were still coming. Shivara's career had ended. The day she lost the Crimson Talon, she had been demoted and reassigned to administrative duties, while younger commanders tried desperately to stem the tide, but nothing worked. The humans fought with a patience that wore down even the fiercest Vathic warriors. They did not need to win every battle, because they knew they would win the war eventually. Shivara received a communication on her personal console. It was marked with human encryption protocols, which should have been impossible on a secure Vathic military network, but the humans had been inside their systems for months now, and Shivara was no longer surprised by their reach. She opened the message. It was a simple invitation to meet at a neutral location and a mining station in unclaimed space. The sender was Marcus Webb. Shivara should have reported it immediately. Instead, she found herself arranging unauthorized leave and taking a small courier ship to the coordinates. The mining station was mostly automated and provided a neutral space where representatives from different species could meet without violating territorial boundaries. Marcus was waiting in a small observation lounge that looked out at a blue nebula. He stood with his hands clasped behind his back and looked older than Shivara remembered. The gray in his hair had spread and new lines marked his face. Commander Shivara. He greeted her without turning. "Thank you for coming. Why did you ask me here?" she demanded while her hand rested on her sidearm. "To answer your question," Marcus said simply. He turned to face her, and his eyes held that same calm certainty that had unnerved her from their first meeting. "I have answered many of your questions." "No," Marcus said. "The important one, and the one you have been asking yourself for 6 months." Shivara felt her tail curl with tension. "Which question? Why did I not flee when I had the chance?" Marcus replied, "At the colony and in the early days. And you keep wondering what kind of being chooses imprisonment over escape." He was right. The question had haunted Shivara through every retreat and every loss. She had studied human psychology and tried to understand the mindset of someone who would sacrifice themselves so completely. "I have theories," she said carefully. Marcus gestured to the chairs by the observation window. "Sit," he offered. "This conversation deserves comfort." Shivara hesitated, then settled into a chair designed for species with tails. Marcus sat across from her, and for a moment they simply looked at each other. "Your empire is falling," Marcus said gently. "I know," Shivara admitted. "We underestimated your species." "Yes," Marcus agreed. "But that is not why you came here." Shivara's flaws flexed against the armrest. "I came because I need to understand," she said. "My people are calling you demons and monsters and some kind of unnatural predator species. Are we?" Marcus asked. "I do not know," Shivara said honestly. "I have seen your people fight with a patience that seems inhuman, and I have watched you dismantle an empire piece by piece. And you did it all because one engineer decided not to run." Marcus was quiet for a long moment, while looking out at the nebula. "Do you know what I was thinking about when your warriors broke into my engineering bay?" he finally asked. "What?" "My daughter," Marcus said softly. "She is 15 years old and loves xenobiology and wants to study alien species and learn about the galaxy." He turned to look at Shivara. "When I saw your ships attacking the station, I knew I was probably going to die," he continued. "And I knew that even if I escaped, the Vathic would keep coming and would keep destroying human colonies until they reached Earth. So you chose to fight. I chose to ensure my daughter would not have to," Marcus corrected. He leaned forward with his hands clasped. "Commander, when you asked me why I did not flee, I gave you tactical answers," he said. "I told you about intelligence gathering and strategic positioning, and all of that was true. But it was not the whole truth." "No," Marcus admitted. "The whole truth is simpler and more terrifying." Shivara waited. "I stayed because if I ran, I would only save myself," Marcus said quietly. "But if I stayed, I could save everyone else, and that is the difference between your kind and mine. You have said this before, but you have not truly understood it." Marcus replied, "Your species fights to conquer and to expand your territory and to bring glory to your empire." "Yes," Shivara acknowledged. "This is the Vathic way, and it is a way that makes sense from a certain perspective," Marcus said. "Take what you can and grow your power and crush your enemies before they can threaten you." He stood and walked to the window. "But humans fight for a different reason," he continued. "We fight to protect and to ensure our children can grow up in peace and to make certain that the sacrifices we make today mean our descendants will not have to make the same sacrifices tomorrow." Shivara rose to stand beside him. "You see sacrifice as the highest good. We see sacrifice as the only thing worth doing." Marcus said, "What is the point of survival if we teach our children that running and hiding is how you stay safe?" He turned to face her fully. "I did not flee because fleeing would have taught my daughter that when monsters come, you should save yourself first," he explained. "But I wanted to teach her that when monsters come, you stand and fight, and you do whatever is necessary to stop them from reaching the people you love." Shivara felt something break inside her understanding of the universe. Even if it costs you everything, especially if it costs you everything, Marcus confirmed, because that is how you know it was worth doing. This is why you won. Shivara whispered. Marcus nodded slowly. You thought you were fighting soldiers and warriors and military forces, he said, but you were actually fighting parents and siblings and people who would rather die than let you threaten their families. He looked out at the nebula. Every human you killed had people who loved them. Marcus continued, and every colony you destroyed had children who will grow up remembering, and every victory you claimed created thousands of people who will spend their lives making sure it never happens again. We created our own destruction. Yes, Marcus said simply. You attacked the species of persistence hunters, and then you were surprised when we persisted. Shivara's legs felt weak. What happens now? She asked. Marcus was quiet for a moment. That depends on your people, he finally said. If the Vathic continue to fight humanity, we'll continue to chase until your empire is nothing but a memory. And if we surrender, then we stop chasing, Marcus replied. Humans do not fight for glory or conquest, and we fight to protect, and once the threat is gone, we have no reason to continue. Shivara looked at this human who had destroyed her entire civilization with patience and intelligence and an absolute refusal to give up. You are the most terrifying being I have ever encountered, she said honestly. Marcus smiled sadly. I am just a father who wanted his daughter to be safe, he replied. But I understand why that is terrifying to you. He moved toward the door, then paused. Commander Shivara, I came here to give you the answer you have been seeking, he said. I did not flee because running is what prey does, and I refuse to teach my species to be prey. You taught them to be predators instead. No, Marcus corrected. I taught them to be survivors who are willing to sacrifice everything to protect what matters, and there is a difference. He looked at her one last time with those steady human eyes. We are not monsters, Commander, he said. We are parents and friends and people who love our families enough to walk into hell if it keeps them safe. And that makes you more dangerous than any monster. Marcus nodded. Yes, he agreed, because monsters can be killed. But people who are protecting their children will never stop. He walked to the door. Go back to your people, he said. Tell them what you have learned, and tell them that if they want to survive, they need to understand what they are really facing. What are they facing? Marcus paused in the doorway. A species that values its young more than its own survival, he said. A species that will chase you across the galaxy if you threaten them, and a species that will never forgive and never forget. He left without another word. Shivara stood alone in the observation lounge and finally understood the true horror of what the Vathic had unleashed. They had not attacked a prey species. They had attacked protective parents, and now those parents were coming, not with rage or hatred, but with the cold, patient determination of beings who had decided that the only way to keep their children safe was to ensure the Vathic could never threaten anyone again. Shivara returned to Vathic Prime and submitted her report to the military council. 3 days later, the Empire sued for peace. The humans accepted on the condition that the Vathic would never again attack another species unprovoked. Chase was over, but Shivara knew that humanity would be watching forever if